Good morning, everyone. We are here today with another podcast, and the topic for this session today is M&A should be transformational, not transactional. I welcome Jennifer. Jennifer is, founder and chief community officer for Day One Ready. It's one of the M&A consulting firm. Jennifer doesn't need introduction. I have already done another podcast earlier, but she, with her title chief community officer, you can surely guess what she does. So what I am going directly to have very interesting discussion on this topic, Jennifer. So I'll just start with very basic questions, and I think that way you get your introduction as well. How did you get into M&A? What is your back story that you have? You are so vocal about M&A and how they should be done.
Well, first, I want to say thank you. I'm feel privileged to be a return guest. I don't
Yeah.
know who your talk show hosts are in India. Here, when you're a return guest, it's quite an honor. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you wanting to continue our conversation. Uh, and as you've teased me before, my path into mergers and acquisitions is very circuitous.
Yeah.
I did not come from the Big Four consultancy. I do not have that background. I actually was a chief marketing officer,
Yeah.
and I went through three multi-billion-dollar M&A deals. I've been
Mhm.
acquired. I've been an acquirer. I've been acquired by private equity, which is its own unique event, and that
Right.
perspective is what I bring to my M&A work. I focus largely on M&A integration, and it's my work is really informed by what I experienced as an executive going through a
Mhm.
merger or acquisition, both being on the receiving end, being acquired,
Mhm.
and seeing what happened to people around me, but then also acquiring a team, being a leader, trying to lead people through
Mhm.
what can often be a very fearful time for employees, and uh, with change and uncertainty almost happening on a daily basis.
Mhm.
So really, my origin story, my first acquisition when I was head of B2B marketing at Navtech and we were acquired by Nokia, that really informs all that I do on M&A leadership. That's really my focus, is helping prepare executives and their leadership for
Mhm.
the people challenges of a merger or an acquisition.
So that was your transition from marketing to M&A.
It
That
was, and
okay.
and and I will say, Dharmendra, that the the fascinating thing for me is initially all I planned to do was write a book. I was just going
Yeah.
to write my book. Now what? A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisitions. But so many CEOs who I interviewed for the book kept asking me,
Yeah.
what are you doing besides the book? You need to work as a consultant to help
Yeah.
leadership be smarter about these challenges that continue to undermine the success of a deal.
Right. And I think I quite agree with you, Jennifer, because M&A is a skill which you can acquire by working. Because
Hmm.
how much you study in university, go and study M&A, but they still become basic because unless until you go and work on live deal where you have opportunity to, learn M&A skill. So I think that is the good transition I can say for you from marketing directly to coming to M&A.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, and I know we talked about the last time.
Yeah.
I have a heightened sensitivity to corporate identity because of my time in marketing.
Yeah. Hmm.
My view on how employees identify with a company. Like when a
Yeah.
company is doing well, you hope that they identify, right? They will bleed the
Right.
colors of the company. The
Yeah.
logo means something to them. And
Exactly.
when you pivot after a merger and acquisition, and you expect
Right.
them to just now transform and move forward as a different company with a different
Hmm.
name, or maybe that's still in flux.
Right.
Uh, Leadership too often underestimates the power of having a corporate identity and how people
Yeah.
can grieve the loss of that identity after an acquisition. So you're right, my marketing does inform a lot of the work.
Right. But marketing is a great component for any M&A deal, right? So marketing and branding. If you look at these are the important strengths for any M&A. And
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
yeah,
It's interesting that you say that. I feel not just the marketing, but so I'm half French.
mhm,
My father's French. I worked in internationally, and I realized afterwards that my cultural sensitivity had me pick up on the culture
yeah,
tension probably
mhm,
sooner than most. Marketing certainly played a role, but I recognize, particularly with the Navtech Nokia situation, they were B2C and we were B2B.
mhm.
I had a greater sensitivity to the
Yeah.
cultural tension, and I bring that to my work as well.
Right. So, coming to my next question to you, what do you see as difference between transactional versus transformational M&A?
Well, and I always want to be quick to say, I recognize that the majority of mergers and acquisitions have been
Yeah,
transactional, meaning
yeah,
that they were opportunistic. It was an
hmm,
opportunity to bring in a solution, a product, service, or a solution that complemented, expanded presence in one particular industry or business segment.
hmm,
So the point is not to poo-poo or denigrate transactional. My thesis was really to propose that if you really want transformational
hmm,
M&A, and particularly nowadays, as you know full well, right,
yeah,
with such volatility in the market, you should be striving for
of course.
transformational M&A. Right? We talk about disrupt yourself or be disrupted. To me, that's why you should be striving for transformational M&A. But to achieve transformational M&A, you can't use a transactional approach. You can't approach it with a playlist or a
Hmm.
checklist and playbooks, you know,
Yeah,
striving for certainty with every step. That will not be successful. And so really the thesis was to strive for transformational M&A and
right.
to adopt the right type of mindset and approach in
Hmm.
order to be able to achieve that. And the example that I used in my HBR article comes from a gentleman actually I know from my Navtech days who was the head of M&A integration at Navtech. Then he was at General Mills and now is at Ford. But Doug Power shared the story
Hmm.
of how General Mills pivoted from being very opportunistic, right?
Hmm.
Looking for products that they could add to the General Mills portfolio,
Yeah,
like Annie's,
hmm, right.
expanding into organic. But he said we wanted to transform the company, get into pet food,
Hmm.
use our expertise in product line and operations and logistics and bring that um, to the pet food category. And so,
Category, yeah.
in that sense,
Hmm.
transformation, you have to be intentional and seek it out, but it
Exactly.
is possible.
Yeah. So in fact, when you said this, I just recall, so any M&A deal, transaction, if you keep just, it's very transactional, it's shorter. If you do transformation, it's long-term value creation. So I think more focus is on value creation rather than just completing the deal, closing the transaction and not focusing on integration, right? So if you see the transformation, it takes time. It's very, you mentioned agile approach. So it's very agile approach. You have to,
Right.
keep doing things on right time, making sure that focus on long-term goal rather than short-term, So I think most of the deals, at least where I work, we always focus on more on long-term goal, what is the value creation what is the synergy we want to achieve, rather than just closing the deal, right? And most of the deal we have the problem. As soon as deal is signed and closed, there is no integration team. There is no focus on long term, right? So
I
this is
know. That's why I'm so thankful you brought me back on. You and I, we sing the same song, right?
yeah,
Hit the nail on the head. It's that long-term
yeah,
thinking. Not
right,
what will we achieve year one,
yeah,
but how do we transform the company in
right.
order to be successful? And frankly, I will say to you, when Navtech, we were the
Mm,
digital map maker, the leading digital map maker at the time, when we were acquired by Nokia,
Mhm.
I believed it was for transformation. I thought, this is brilliant. Nokia appreciates and understands
Yeah.
that connecting over the phone, they still
Mhm.
want to be part of connecting, but it will go
Yeah.
beyond the phone. It'll be through location-based solutions.
Right.
And that is why, I regret that deal did not achieve the potential that it had, and why I have sensitivity to seek transformational M&A, but then have the right approach to be able
Yeah.
to do
Right.
that.
Right. So first is the focus for long term, value creation, and then you start putting this in agile format, the way you explained earlier to me, putting it a proper plan, tracking it, and of course, this checklist and other things are also evolve, right? It's get evolve over time. It's not like you do it today and it's going to work for across all the days. So I think this is a good point.
Right. And
So
and as you
yeah.
as you highlighted, it's
Mhm.
the two combined. It's why I use the
Yeah.
wordplay in my article, right? It's both
Right.
mindset
Yeah.
and agility. M&A stands for mindset and agility. I really
Right.
wanted to
Yeah.
highlight that because you can have an agile approach, but if you don't have that long-term
Right.
adaptable mindset that's willing to
Yeah.
embrace uncertainty, you'll be
Mhm.
frustrated.
Yeah. So, I was just going through your article for what you have done for SPR. So, can you talk about some checklists because you have written about checklists and playbook are being potential hindrance to transformational M&A. Can you give some more detail about this?
Well, and the important point that I want to make is not to say that checklists or playbooks are negative.
Yeah.
They absolutely have a role, but I see them being used as the end all be all, as the solution, right? Well, if we
Mhm.
just check everything off on the checklist, we're fine. And
Yeah.
a gentleman that I interviewed from a technology company said he finds that people, the because they have a checklist, they almost forget to think. They're so
Mhm.
focused on going through the checklist, they aren't really looking for what's the right next step. Right now that I'm
Right.
seeing the fluidity of the situation, I'm picking up on maybe some cultural tension.
Right.
But they're still so focused on, yes, but we've got to get through the checklist. They're not adapting to the situation in front of them. And it's why I
Mhm.
use the example,
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself having been at NavTech using an example of map data, right? When you're
Yeah.
driving a car, in the past, we only had historical data,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
your mapping solution in your car would only be based on what historically the traffic patterns were at this
Yeah.
time. But now, thanks to the evolution of technology, now we
Yeah.
have real-time traffic data that's being fed to you. So you can
Right.
adjust, take a
Yeah.
different route. You could maybe use the express lane because now you've got a passenger
Yeah.
when you didn't before. And so I
Yeah.
use that example to say,
Mhm.
we can't just base our decision making on historical, here's how we've always done it.
Mhm.
You need to be able to adapt and
Yeah.
adjust to the information that's right in front of you. And so that was really the
Right.
point that I was trying to make as it relates to, the typical
Mhm.
transactional approach to things. It's why I
Right.
said, if you continue to have a transactional approach, you will not have
Yeah.
transformational M&A.
Right. Right. So that's what when I was going through, you mentioned about checklist, and I know most of the company they have the checklist, but as you clarified that checklist is important, but it should not be like binding force. People have
Correct.
to evolve. Yeah.
Because, and I think too, what I've seen, and I would love to hear your thought on this.
Hmm.
My perception now, having sat through, thousands of due diligence discussions and
Hmm.
watching post deal, that by having that playbook and checklist, people think they'll
Yeah.
have certainty. They think,
Yeah.
well, we've done this
No.
before. These are the
Yeah.
steps we need to take. And I will always say, no, 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 right?
Mm.
Because you don't have a playbook for human
Yeah.
nature.
Right.
Actually, in the book that I wrote, I had many times at the beginning when I first came out with the book, people would say, oh, is this a playbook for people? Right? Is
Yeah.
this a playbook for human nature? And I'll say,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
It gives you insight into what
Yeah.
drives people's behaviors. in times of fear and uncertainty, but it shouldn't be considered a playbook. I don't want you to think that, oh, if I read this book, then I'll know how to deal with people. And so that's really that's the key is recognizing that, it's absolutely important, but don't think it brings you certainty.
Exactly not. So if you look at all the playbooks, in my last organization when I used to work, my role was basically to build the overall process for M&A across the company globally, making sure that everyone had a basic framework of process. Because what was happening is people were using their own process, and if you're a very complex company, there are different business in it. They have the M&A mandates, they have budget to buy the company, and they used to, they don't follow any approach, right? Or the biggest challenge is nobody talk to each other. So, maybe you are doing the same mistake what other guy is doing. So nobody was learning. Then we decided, let's put a common structure. So that came as a checklist, the process, do and don'ts, what are the mandatory thing, what is deal specific thing you can do. That gave us surely not a guarantee that you are going to make deal as a successful and you are going to create more value, but it gives you a direction. And then people were allowed at looking at, the long term, that whatever synergy you have planned, how you are going to achieve, and put very solid action item for that. So I think these are the building blocks. So playbook and checklists are not a guarantee that if you follow that, you are going to be successful and you are going to achieve everything in the deal. But they set the right direction for you. It's because many people are, because it is on with, entire organization have to follow. So you want to make some process and guideline, which gives you some direction. And then based on your deal and, objective, what you wanted to achieve in long term, that you have to really make sure that will not come only from the transaction. It will be transformational. It is going to take some time, and then you have to track it to make sure that you are able to achieve. So I agree with your point. Yeah, I agree with your point now.
And that's you've just laid out, right? Why I said playbooks and checklists are foundational, but an agile approach. And I realized I benefited from an agile approach, but by having worked in technology. But that not all companies were using an agile type approach. And exactly as you laid out, right? When you design the deal and then define the objectives and your OKRs, right? And then you're dividing the work into sprints. And using an agile approach for the M&A integration. And then on top of that, as you highlighted, right, another key aspect of agile is that cross-functional communication, right? You're soliciting, you're assessing the work, you're iterating and adjusting, and you're constantly in that cycle, but you're forcing cross communications, cross-team communication in order to make sure, because there are interdependencies. You can't, if you all go back into your silos, post-deal and the integration, you're doomed to fail. So it's really that solicit, assess, iterate, and adjust approach that I took away from my agile experience when in technology, seeing how that has applications for transformational M&A was equally the point of, that I wanted to put forth.
Yeah. So any product company, they generally use agile methodologies. That's how they develop the product, so that it's short term, short goals they try to achieve and then move forward, and they iterate. The goal is to make sure that whatever activity you do, it's done right. It's looking at long-term goal. And then we define a sprint cycle, which says that, okay, at the end of sprint, these are the top 4 things we are going to deliver. So I think agile approach, we also follow in M&A, right? So in 100 days, within 100 days also, we define 30 days, you are going to achieve X thing. And then next 30 days, you are going to achieve something, and then 100 days, you are completing. The idea is to break the whole work into different pieces and achieve those sort of goals to make the transformation right. So when I was going through your article, I was just, imagining my, clear background on how is to develop product, how is to, inform team why this agile is so important. And it's very easy to track.
Yeah. And you know, then you also know from an agile approach, right, that
Yeah,
you're constantly debriefing.
yeah,
Where are
exactly.
we in the process and what's going well and what's not? And then
Right.
as you debrief, right? Because
Yeah,
you and I have talked about this before with the
yeah,
history of M&A, frankly, having more failures than successes.
yeah,
I have found, okay, well, learn from the failures. Why have they failed, right?
yeah,
I focus, I'm obsessed with the people part,
yeah,
right? But
exactly.
as you're looking for transformational um, M&A,
Mhm.
that is critical to it, is debriefing and then learning from what was not working and then
Right.
adjusting, right? And then
Yeah.
frankly, I've seen this happen repeatedly when you're doing that, you know,
Mhm.
as in partnership, when the companies are
Yeah,
coming together, and you're debriefing
exactly.
together, that
Yeah,
builds trust.
yeah,
That
exactly.
that helps people see, okay,
Mhm.
we're unified. We want to learn how to do this better together, as opposed to, well, you know, this was your screw up, this was
Yeah,
your screw up, right? It can
exactly.
force that us
Yeah,
versus them thinking and make things worse. So to me, the agile approach of debriefing
yeah,
and learning from those mistakes
right.
is equally important.
Yeah, and also it increase your ownership. So whatever you deliver, you own it and deliver it, right? So it's more of ownership. Sense of ownership is much higher if you do agile approach. So
Yeah.
my next question to you was, by writing about more about transformational M&A, what do you hope to achieve? What are your objective in writing this article? Because I was going through your article and you have mentioned that.
Well, you know, we've covered it. Being invited
Yeah,
onto your
yeah,
podcast was really my
yeah,
objective, right?
yeah,
Because I, for me, the opportunity, and I don't take it lightly that
yeah,
I had the privilege of writing for Harvard Business Review.
yeah,
It's a very important audience, and
yeah,
really, for me, the opportunity to share that there is transformational M&A is possible,
yeah,
but you have to be intentional and you have to not just have playbooks and checklists,
yeah,
but be able to think beyond that. And so putting forth the importance of having the right mindset and an agile approach. I didn't want to just say, hey, transformational M&A
yeah,
is important.
exactly.
I wanted to put forth a solution. Here's how
Yeah,
to achieve it. And you know, for me, equally important, and it's I included at the end of my article as well, as having employee metrics,
yeah,
right? That the metrics for M&A success,
yeah,
particularly transactional, have been,
yeah,
did it hit the forecast, the
mhm,
valuation by year one? And my
yeah,
premise is you equally need to have metrics that are applicable to the people, right?
right.
So how well have the new employees integrated?
Mhm,
Have new employees and veteran employees, do they have the same
yeah,
opportunities from a career path standpoint,
yeah,
right? How quickly were they able to
mhm,
contribute? Because you and I
yeah,
have both seen that
right.
tends to be on the people side, the
Mhm,
productivity drop,
yeah,
the
a
loss,
lot.
you know,
Yeah,
the retention is an issue.
right.
Even
Yeah,
attracting new employees is an issue.
yeah,
So for me,
mhm,
employee metrics
yeah,
was equally important to highlight as part of what you need to consider for transformational M&A.
right. And I think this is always long term. You cannot, when you
Right.
your new employees are joining, and maybe there are some positions which people have not been identified what they are going to do while they are joining the new company. It becomes very difficult. So it's always long term. It takes time, but planning in advance, making sure that we are tracking it, that really helps you. So
Right.
I have only last question to you, and what are the next article you are writing? I know you must be writing something.
I know I'm always writing. Well, actually my husband would say I'm always writing or I'm always talking.
Yeah, yeah, that I know. So that's why I asked that you must be writing something. I don't want to, name it, but
No,
what are
I
the,
appreciate the question. Well, actually it builds on my last point, right? The key
yeah,
employee metrics.
yeah,
I had the opportunity to participate in Clint Kendrick's
yeah,
HR M&A Roundtable conference
right, right,
earlier in the
yeah,
spring. and they led an amazing session. Clint and
Yes.
Susan Hanold led a session on
Yeah.
dashboards, right? What should be the universal M&A dashboard scorecard?
Scorecard. Yeah.
There's debate on whether you call it a scorecard or not,
Uh-huh.
but to me, it's how do we universally have a set of metrics that
Yeah.
leadership agrees to,
Mhm.
and clearly employee metrics, right? How are we
Yeah.
doing with employees is a key part of that. So working with Clint and Susan and David Lawler, who I know you know
Right. Right.
in
Right.
M&A as
Yeah.
well, to
Yeah.
really
Mhm.
expose that, right? Have
Yeah.
a thesis for what should that scorecard have, and how do we
Right.
get that
Yeah.
adopted universally?
Right. So Clint is my good friend, and we have done podcasts in past. We are in touch. So I'm sure that he is one of the experts I consider for anything in HR. If even I have any question, I directly write an email to him.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad I'm also on your phone list.
Yeah. So thanks for your time today, Jennifer. Thanks audience for listening. We'll have this podcast live in few days, and we'll happy to invite again for another round of discussion on different topic. But thanks for your time, and we look forward to working with you again. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.